Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Reveal Report. I'm your host, George Iceman. Thank you for being here on this Friday as we get into the esoteric, the supernatural, the occult, the paranormal, all those things that you want to hear about. We're going to talk about today in regards to witchcraft. It is the season of the witch. That's what they say. And I want to get into it because October is going to be a very fun. And when I mean fun, I mean you're going to get a lot of information is what I mean by that. It's not a fun month because there's a lot going on, but it'll be a lot of information for you guys. Tonight, we cover a little bit of history about witchcraft. And next week, we are going to talk about modern day witches. We're going to talk about some very big names and who we think are major witches in the world. That's next week. The week after that, we're looking to confirm an exorcist. And then the week after that, which is Halloween weekend, we are going to talk about the history of Halloween, those rituals, parties, and events that take place on Halloween. It's going to be a very interesting month, so we hope you join us. Thank you for liking and subscribing. Again, we appreciate you guys following us on our social media, which is on Telegram. Thank you so much. On Twitter, thank you for that. Instagram, and of course, right here on YouTube. We appreciate all the love and support. And especially the new people that have just joined us. There's been some new subscribers today, especially T. Marie or T. Maria, but I think it's T. Marie. So thank you, T. Marie, for joining. We're looking forward to hearing and seeing you in the after show. And on PayPal, thank you to Karen and thank you to Lisa. God bless you guys. Without your help, this wouldn't be possible. We would just do Patreon and we wouldn't even be on YouTube. So much love and thanks. Get your popcorn. Get ready. It's going to be a fun show, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome my co-host and author, Miss Jessie Czebotar. Jessie, how are you?
Great. Hello, hello.
Well, we're going to get into it. Witchcraft and its history. What are witches? Where do they come from? What is it all about? Is it true? Is it fake? Do they have supernatural powers? Do they use those powers for good or for evil? Do they cast spells? Do they make potions? What is the difference between the witches from the day and the witches of today? We're going to get all into that, Jessie. And I got to say, it's going to be a very interesting show. I think we should begin with a little bit of history. Where do witches come from? Well, it goes back a very long time. Here's what some people will say in regards to the occult studies of witchcraft. And it goes back to the Greek. I'm going to play a video and then we'll fill in back and forth a little bit of content to give you guys some information. I ask you guys to please turn up your volume, listen very, very carefully to the names that are dropped of the first original so-called witches and those women of supernatural power and ability that people worship, praised, and did rituals for. So take a good listen. It's a very good little documentary. It's a few minutes long. I want you to take a look. Here it is.
Look no further back than ancient Greece, whose mythology is populated with gods, demigods, beasts, and creatures created out of the angered god's vengeance or pity. Hesiod's Theogony, an epic poem from around the 8th century BC, describes a goddess of magic who predates the Greek pantheon of Mount Olympus. Hecate was so powerful and revered that even the king of the Greek gods, Zeus, paid her homage.
Hecate, whom Zeus the son of Kronos honored above all. He gave her splendid gifts to have her share the earth and the unfruitful sea. She received honors also in starry heaven, and is honored exceedingly by the deathless gods. For to this day, whenever any one of men on earth sacrifices and prays for favor according to custom, he calls upon Hecate. Great honor comes full easily to him whose prayers the goddess receives favorably, and she bestows wealth upon him, for the power surely is with her.
Zeus comes into power by defeating the original gods, the Titans. One of the early gods, Hecate, wins his favor and is spared banishment. She becomes associated with the underworld, that realm of the dead in Hades, as well as the dead souls wandering as ghosts above ground. Statues of her are placed in doorways and at crossroads to keep the wandering spirits at bay. More destructive and decidedly evil is Circe, a true witch of Greek mythology. This enchantress is also a demigod. Her father was Helios, the sun god. She lives on the island Aiaia, some say as a banishment. When several of Odysseus' men feast at Circe's mansion, she drugs them with a potion and then transforms them into swine. One of the crew, Eurylochus, escapes to tell Odysseus. Under the advice of the god Hermes, Odysseus successfully restores his crew, and then enjoys a year on the Circe's island, as well as her company. As Christianity emerges with its single god, pantheons of gods, such as Greek and Egyptian, are deemed paganistic. The witch and the sorceress figure, in the eyes of Christianity, are no longer for God, but in tune with the devil.
So here we are. That's some very interesting information of the two women from that Greek time period, Hecate and Circe. Two women, and you saw their power and how kings would even give them gifts and so forth. So I want to touch on that first, those two particular names. Obviously, we're going to go back even a little bit further, but those are very important. What are your thoughts on what you just seen, Jesse, in regards to some of the first of the witches?
It's interesting. I would say I think witchcraft predates the Greek era. You're getting more into the Egyptian, or even before that. Scripture talks in Genesis 6, of those that learned witchcraft. So it was interesting. And Hecate was a name that, you know, whether she was human or, I think that's interesting. They bring out kind of that connection that she may have been human in that. Um, in my studies as a child, that was another name for Ashtaroth, for, this, who was a demonic spirit. So a fallen angel. So it's interesting to, pose that question. Really, is it speaking to that angel that also goes, by the name Isis, Ashtoreth, Jezebel, or was it indeed a woman that maybe back farther, is connected to the breeding with the fallen angels? So,
And we're going to go there because from my studies and experience in the occult, I would say many look up to one particular woman by name who was apparently so-called the first woman of creation. So they say. And her name was Lilith.
yeah,
Lilith has a lot of history. There's a lot of information. Some try to refute that, but to my teachings, Lilith, the spirit of Lilith, especially, guys, I spent 13 plus years in the occult. I could truly say I tried communicating with the spirit of Lilith. It's a very nasty spirit, very
yeah,
evil spirit. In fact, the day I tried to communicate with Lilith, and this is a true story, I had a horrible morning. Terrible. It was horrendous. And I went out shopping for some lunch and I wanted some fresh fruit. And I have an entire basket of oranges, Jesse. This whole basket of beautiful oranges. I picked one that I thought I was the ripest. I grabbed it for lunch and I cut it open. And you'll never guess that at every single orange in that basket, I had one that was completely rotten. That is horrendous. That was my experience with Lilith. But let's stick to it. Thoughts on Lilith? Do you believe she technically is that first type of witch that many other women turn to and to learn from?
I learned that as, that was also another name for the demonic being Ashtaroth. So, um, I vary on some of the teachings. I don't believe it was a woman. I don't believe it was Adam's first wife. Um, I stick with the Bible in that as to Eve being the first wife, but I know that some occult teachings go that direction with that.
Now, if you want to go to a time in the book of Enoch, it is said, as you know, that the sons of God took the daughters of men and dated them, took them for their wives, and mated with them. It's said in the book of Enoch that these fallen ones, these fallen angels, taught women root work. Listen carefully. Root work. What do we know about root work? Well, that has to do with spells and incantations and healings and other things. So these fallen ones are the one that brought this information to these women. And then, of course, the women bore children with these fallen ones and created giants. But here it is, Jesse. Who do you think would be the most documented as the one that most got knowledge from to become witches, or the first type of famous witch? Would you say it was those daughters of men, or was it Lilith?
That's a hard one. I
Right?
I guess what's your guess? I guess I would have to go with probably Lilith, I
I
guess.
would go with Lilith because we know by name, because that
Right.
name is very occultic and it goes into many different texts. It's written
Mhm.
about frequently, especially in the occult. There's a lot of power, a lot of people look to Lilith for guidance and power in ritual magic and
Mhm.
calling upon her. My experience was horrendous with her, and that's just the truth. Most of my experiences in the occult and the supernatural are horrible. That's just fact. Let's just be real.
Yeah.
This whole show is to bring light and to reveal the truth of the occult. Now, occult doesn't necessarily mean practicing ritual magic. It means hidden knowledge, supernatural power. I am studying those hidden things. I don't participate in any of that stuff, but it's important that I still stay keen into what is written, what they're talking about, find old text so I could translate, put it together, and share it with you guys. This is some very crazy stuff. And if you think
Mm.
this is a joke or some kind of fantasy, it's not. People actually use magic and rituals to manifest their desires, to receive power, gifts, and then they find ways to make money from it. You could hire a witch to help manifest a spell for you. She would put a spell to curse someone for revenge. She would do some incantations, depending how high up you want to go and what you want to
Mhm.
accomplish. You could even run for office, Jesse. Many testimonies of that come out with certain
Yeah.
rituals. You can pass laws, and these people hire these witches and warlocks to come forth and do these things. It's unbelievable. So
Yeah.
some people will say, come on, this can't be real. This is all hogwash. Well,
I
for
was gonna say, are you saying that they're in our governmental buildings? And I've heard of some of that maybe they've had them in the White House or other places to get advice and to do incantations and stuff.
this is exactly what I'm saying.
Maybe.
I want to show you something that's very, very important here. And I didn't understand this until I came to Christ. And this is very powerful. Ephesians 6:12. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers and against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. heavenly realms, the supernatural. This is what we're dealing with. And these are what human beings try to do deals with in order to accomplish their desires. Witches absolutely positively exist. They can use incantations, they use divination, and they
Mhm.
speak to other spiritual beings so that they could get their desire and use it for money. You will hire them to do things for you. Now, Jesse, you were surrounded growing up, as you said in the past, by
Yeah.
these individuals. Maybe just go into a little bit of what you witnessed with people actually doing spells, actually doing real rituals for manifestation.
Yeah, things were classified into kind of the different categories that we see labeled in Genesis 6, where, you have sorcery, you have divination, you have um, forms of witchcraft. So each of those are, different. We've talked about on the show how there's different types of magic. You got the Solomonic, you've got the Enochian, the Gaoshan, the Thelemic. It goes on, and there's a difference between magic with a C, which is parlor tricks, and magic with a K, which is more the real deal stuff. So at the real deal, it goes far beyond just the sorcery or what we would just consider light types of magic, whether light or dark, because at its darkest roots, they begin to get into necromancy, where they're trying to communicate with the dead or communicating with demonic spirits that may even be fallen ones that are in the abyss.
Mhm.
There are attempts by high level magicians to open that abyss and communicate with those that the Lord has chained until the day of judgment. They're not allowed to roam the earth and to make contracts and compacts with those chained beings. And, at the darker forms too, you begin to get into types of blood magic and, where they're summoning demons and making blood contracts and, um, you know, darker forms of divination. They would use whether it was scrying or even they would use water to see and peer and spy. And, so I witnessed quite a bit of different forms of witchcraft and divination. At the highest levels, they don't use other practitioners' work. Their job as a high level practitioner as they elevate is to create their own. So several of my teachers would create their own books of the dead, the Book of Shadows, their own grimoires. They would write their own psalms or dark magic psalms in order to, um, have their incantations basically come to life or come into existence. So
Again, this is unbelievable thing. So you are confessing, you are giving testimony that you witnessed people actually do these type of things.
yes, yeah,
Now, for those who don't believe, there are many type of witches out there and many different styles of magic. There's folk magic, which I started off with. There's hoodoo, which I participated in. There's Solomonic magic, which I also participated in. That was some spooky stuff.
yeah. Both of us were engaged with that as I was small when I did that.
Yeah. I was an adult of my own free will. And I went on quite the journey with that. And I believe, Jesse, that the Lord allowed me to do some of it. Now, I didn't go all the way, obviously, because I think the Lord had other plans and he works in mysterious ways, as we all know that. And I think I learned what I needed to so I can share and
Mhm.
appreciate everything that the Lord has. Guys, this is so real. And you could talk to anybody you want, different um, former witches, different type of occultists, and they're all going to tell you the same thing. There's a special documentary the BBC did a very long time ago, over 20 years ago. Man, I'm going to say over 30 years ago, I believe.
Mm.
And I'm uploading it because I'd like it to share with every single person out there who's never seen it before. Very, very rare documentary on witchcraft. And I took a clip, and I want to share with everybody this clip and then get your take on this. This is an actual witch. And here's what she had to say. An actual witch that showed up on the documentary. Listen to what she says.
Doreen Valiente is a witch, and she believes that witchcraft should never be approached lightly.
The amount of silly dabbling in the occult that goes on today scares me. These people think that they're doing something terribly clever and terribly with it, and it's all great fun. And what they don't understand is that they're invoking forces which they can't fathom, and they're making themselves a channel by which those forces can come through into the world.
They're making themselves a channel which those forces come through the world. Remember that these entities are in spirit form, not human form. And they use you as a conduit to do what they want to do because they have to live through you and what you do. And they live on a very low vibration. What does that mean? Dark, evil, misery, sorrow, agony. This is what makes them strong. They live off this. These entities are older than human beings, these entities. It's older than time that we know. And they're very, very nefarious and evil. And these witches, as you can see, she legitimately, a practicing witch, says that people are messing with the occult and not knowing the dangers involved with it. Comments on that, Jesse?
I think that's absolutely true. And, it's interesting kind of coming from that perspective. You have to ask, why does she then mess with it if she proclaims to be a witch? And, we know there's a difference between those that claim to be light side or dark side. Either way, at the end of the day, as you were saying, it's that uncleanness or sin that opens that doorway, and people find themselves, being that once you open that doorway, all those unclean spirits are going to come and are going to try to take advantage of that sin that you've been found in. And once you open that door, it's really hard to close it unless you've come to Jesus Christ.
I agree. And there's many different verses, guys. And I know some of you here are not biblical. I get it. Some of you are not, Christian. And I don't want to ever use that word. I don't want to begin today. Let's get into that for a few moments. I got to get into it. That's what this show is here. A lot of people say, oh, I'm Christian, or I'm Catholic, or I'm born again Christian, or blah, blah. And there's, right now there's like 30 different sects or more. And I don't believe that's the route we should take when it comes to saying we have a belief. And in a Patreon after show, by the way, guys, you really got to join Patreon and hear these talks. They're phenomenal. A gentleman by the name of Casey has a podcast, and he came on the show and discussed what his father, who was a preacher, had to say. And the father said, what are you? What's your belief? And somebody said there was a Christian. And he said, well, I don't call myself a Christian, but a disciple. And I love it because that's what was called prior to Jesus, when you were a disciple of God and you followed his word and what the Lord had to say. So I never want to say that I'm a Christian or a Catholic or whatever that is. I'm spiritual. I believe in the Lord. I believe in Jesus Christ. And I'm a disciple of God. And I believe that's what I am and how my description should be. Because I think this is a conquer and divide. And what they do is they try to get one pinned against another for the littlest thing. And I find that certain Christians are the most outspoken, cruel people I've ever come across. They attack when they don't like your narrative. They think they're right and the whole world is wrong. And that's a wrong thing to do. And I want to get into that when it comes to witches. And let's get into the Salem witch trials. Interesting. Many people talked about this. It's a very popular thing. And reading about it, I have to say, I'm floored with the information I've come across. Let us
There's a
begin.
lot.
There's a lot there, right, Jesse?
Yeah.
Let's begin with a little history lesson. I'm going to give you guys a very quick video that'll give you a quick intake on how this all began. All right? All you know is that Salem is a place in Massachusetts where witches were tortured and killed. But let's give you a little history on why, and then we're going to really dig deep on this one, Jesse, and reveal some information. Here we go. Turn up your volume and check this out.
Throughout Western history, women were more often accused of being witches, in part because it was easier to deem a woman as acting improperly. As the European witch trials began to dwindle, in the Puritan-populated town of Salem, Massachusetts, the infamous Salem witch trials emerged, terrorizing the town from 1692 to 1693. It began with 9-year-old Elizabeth Parris and 11-year-old Abigail Williams, who started exhibiting strange behaviors, such as contorting their bodies, making odd sounds, and screaming out foolish, ridiculous speeches. Soon after, other young girls began displaying the same behavior. According to both Elizabeth and Abigail's claims, along with the town doctor's diagnosis, their strange behavior was attributed to the supernatural. The girls were eventually pressured by 2 magistrates into naming those supposedly afflicting their bizarre outbursts. They accused 3 women: Sarah Good, a homeless woman; Sarah Osborne, an elderly poor woman; and Tituba, an enslaved woman owned by Elizabeth Parris's family. The accusation set off the Salem witch trials, where over 200 people were accused, and a total of 20 were executed as a result. Of the 20 people killed, 6 were male and the rest were females, none of whom ever admitted to witchcraft. The jury eventually issued apologies, and compensation was offered to the families of the executed. Possibly as many as 13 more perished while in jail on charges of witchcraft, and some believe the number of those executed in the Salem witch trials may have been even higher.
So, the Salem witch trials, it begins with Elizabeth and Abigail. And for those who don't know that they didn't give you some context in it, they were doing something called scrying.
Mm-hmm.
It was an old style game, or was it a magical ritual? And what they did was they had a bowl of water and they would crack an egg and they would look into the yolk, and the yolk would do a certain thing, and that's how they would determine, okay, who possibly their future husband would be. Or they would ask questions. It's a different way of scrying. After that particular situation, and we don't know the exact specifics of what they said during the ritual, but that's the basic situation of that. That's when these things started to manifest into them. Was it fake? We don't know. Did they accuse these 3 people because they were pressured? Again, we don't know. But if you go back to the tapes, and I'm talking the tapes of one John Todd, who's someone I learned a lot from in the occult. This is in the 1970s, he came out with this information. And he is from a long line of witches and warlocks, the Collins family. So he is a Collins. And you could do your research on that name. And he said that he was able to access books. And in fact, the Collins built the church out there. It was a Baptist church or something of that kind. And a lot of the people that were brought in were actually Christians. He said, I believe it was only 1 actual witch, and the rest were Christians. At that time, Jesse, it was said that Revelations was banned from reading and studying. They outlawed Revelations. These are things that happened in this period time. So if you want to believe John Todd, it's what he's saying is that almost all those witches were actually not witches. It was witches persecuting them.
Yeah.
And they were Christian. I want to get your thoughts and what your belief is on that theory.
Well, in the system, we're taught that, those who came over, who were part of that later, were part of that brotherhood system where, you had, you had mothers, you had founding women that were part of the brotherhood system. And, is it possible that, they were the ones teaching these young girls to be priestesses, and then when it was found out by others, it became known in the town. They had to save face and keep things, private as to what they were doing, and in that, they had to accuse someone. And who did they accuse? You know, was it Christians? I think that's very plausible. And are some of those then the founders of some of the under the scene priestess groups that are active in our own country today?
Very good. Now, June had this comment, there is no S in Revelation. You are correct. She was correcting me. She's right. There is no S. I'm just going to confirm that. I apologize. Sometimes, you just add it by mistake. So I do apologize. That is correct. But they were outlawed in reading that Revelation, and they weren't allowed to talk about it. And you truly believe that it was majority of the Christians that were persecuted. Now, notice it wasn't hundreds of thousands. And some of these people, it is said, if you read carefully into this, which I dive deep into this stuff, Jesse, you know that. Some of these people would have disputes over land. Listen how sneaky. And from that, they would want to take your land. So what they would do is accuse that person of being a witch who would possibly be jailed, and they could take your land. So they were blaming everyone to be a witch now so they could benefit. In fact, people would make money off this for being witch hunters. Now, you know what they say, Jesse? If you torture somebody long enough, they're going to admit to anything. And apparently, many of these women were tortured, were beaten, and suffered, and admitted to things that they probably had nothing to do with, and even gave up names if that's what these people wanted them to do. The persecution is unbelievable.
It was. And like you hear some of the things like, that they literally would dunk these women, hold them underwater, chained. So basically they're getting drowned. I mean, it was horrific torture.
It's unbelievable. And, you think about that, how horrible to be a woman in that time. I mean, in any time. But they suffered dramatically. And they were persecuted, and it was wrong. But let's get into that. Women, witches. You think witch, you think women. A man, a warlock. A woman, a witch. John Todd talks about this. Again, I got to share that with you guys because it's so important. I believe I'm playing the correct one here, so I want to play this here. Take a listen very carefully on what John Todd says about women in the order. It's very interesting. Here it is.
About your sister, you said that she was more advanced in witchcraft than yourself.
No.
Or at one time?
No. She was given a position faster than I was.
Faster than you
because
were.
Women are given positions faster than men. Women, except in the higher councils, are the leaders. The high priest is in the coven, but he's only the enforcer. The high priestess is the pastor.
I see. Is she still in the cult? That was the first question.
Yes,
the other one?
is.
She is. Okay.
She's one of Philip Rothschild's girlfriend, and she runs messages between Philip Rothschild and David Rockefeller on a regular basis.
So the males are kind of the enforcers, but it's the women who are the priestesses and the ones of power and knowledge. Now, to my information and my studying and so forth, it is the women that I've come across that are the most powerful in those positions of magic, especially when you hear about the mothers of darkness and their influence in political fields and so forth, and how they're called upon. Women are breeded for this, actually, in many different ways. This is a very deep rabbit hole, but I wanted to get your take on if you agree with John Todd and give a little context to it.
I do. And, in the covens, you usually have, the head priestess is going to be called a mother goddess. She is going to be a high priestess that, is within the system, but she's also going to be under a grand high priestess. So, there are kind of those regional interfaces. Sometimes the mother goddesses are separate, working underneath a high priestess. Now, my question, George, I was thinking about this today, is that you have the warlocks, but in my day in the system, most of those individuals were connected to some sort of druidism.
Mm.
But I found it curious because I didn't know, I'm just curious if others, saw kind of that dynamic where most of the time you would have, a female you have both a female and a male leading a coven together. Um, and, I would know it as the mother goddess and the druid, but do others call that individual a warlock, or is there a difference between a druid and a warlock?
I believe there is a difference in the studies of the Druids. They were more considered the wise men. They were like the lawyers, doctors, and so forth. They practiced it, but I believe the warlock is more about the magic, not about the legal foundation or so forth. Now, some of you guys might have done, if there's any former occultists or current occultists here who could, shed a little bit of light, I'd love to have you on in regards to that. But to my research and my experiences, the warlock is the one who dabbles most in the magical field, who wants to elevate his position of power and get power and strength. Now, there are testimony that at one time there are 6 high priests of the Satanic cult in the world. Let me explain. 6 at one time. These certain priests, these Satanic priests, are the highest of the high when it comes to warlocks. They are the ultimate. They do the ultimate rituals and so forth. They go out and do these things, and they work for these massive covens. These are indeed Satanists, and they conduct sacrifices. And there has been a few who have come out publicly and given testimony to this. So of the highest rank that they testify to, there are only 6 on the planet, okay, at one time of that level. And I believe they're allowed to paint their face any way they want. They get to create their own character and have their own face paint, which is what they represent. Is that face paint and representation of the demonic? Is that represent a particular entity? I don't know that. Sorry, guys. I guess the topic of conversation was a little bit taboo, but I'll get to it again. What I was saying before I was cut off is that there is an actual warlock in face paint in Pink's video, one of her older videos. And that should tell you how the association works. Not some guy who just painted his face. For what reason would it be in there? It is said that some of these musicians are invited to certain parties who want to make it famous before they make it famous. And a warlock will be there who is called in, and he'll go up and down. He'll ask them certain questions, and one of those individuals will give in a card. On that night, that person will go to this location where things will happen, and they'll be, I guess, initiated. This is what testimony has been given in regards to this. Wow. Is magic real? It's a lot. So warlocks do have a position of power, and they are involved. There are a lot of powerful warlocks out there, 100%. But it just seems, from my studies, from my understanding and what I've dealt with, especially dealing with some people high up, women are the most powerful in this sector. Now, some of you in the chat are mentioning a certain woman. I know what you're mentioning. That's next week's show when we talk about modern witches. So stay tuned. I know what you want to hear and what you're talking about. That's next week's show. Let's stick to today's topic, all right? Witchcraft.
Yeah.
Jesse, thoughts on John Todd? Once again, women are the power in these.
I think I think he's perfect. He's right in that. And, from how I saw it, at the lower levels over the covens, the regional areas, you're going to have a mother goddess who's going to be equatable to a high priestess. You're going to have a druidic leader or warlock who's connected to her. Now, even that same hierarchy you see underground in the underground cities, they would have the head woman is going to be called the princess or a queen, and then you're going to have three wizards that are connected to that um, individual. And so this, all the way through the grand high priestesses, they were far more prominent than any of the grand high priests. Then you also have, at the very top, the mothers of darkness. You have even the council, the special chamber councils. You have a woman. If there's a debate between the council, which the Phoenix runs, who's a man, and the special chambers, who's going to end that debate? It's going to be, the female who sits over the special chambers. So um, you do see a lot of the female hierarchy. Now, the twist, George, though, is that as of 2020, things kind of shifted and changed. And we see the new Phoenix stepped into his position. We see all the old dark side members of the council are gone, and we see the light side sitting in that council now. And there's a shift. You don't have the women in the hierarchy, power, or authority anymore. As we see the end times kind of um, they're gearing up for the unfolding of things, and we see a shift in that power from maternal to paternal now.
So much is going on in this world. Witchcraft, witchcraft, witchcraft. I want to
Yeah.
talk a little bit about more John Todd and what he has to say about this type of thing. So I'm going to play another clip, Jesse, and then get you to comment on what John Todd says. Take a listen.
And I told him about a plan of the occult to place certain objects in Christians' homes to be able to put demonic influences into the home and tear down the home and the Christian prayer life and place rebellion and depression and suicide upon Christians. Now you may think, well, I'm a Christian, that's impossible. Listen to me. When you take something that belongs to the devil into your possession, you're asking for trouble. Alright? The Bible, the Word of God, was wholly inspired by the Holy Ghost. Alright? Nobody, I think, will argue with me that's a born-again Christian, at least. Certain objects are inspired by the spirit of Satan, by demonic influence. Rock music. If witches can't cast spells on witches, on Christians, they get smart. They'll let the Christians cast the spells on themselves. The witches will quote the spells in rock music, and they'll let the Christians play them, and they keep casting the spells over and over on themselves. That's why rock music. Now you may think that's garbage, but the witches believe it, and I believe it, because I've seen it done. That's why rebellion and drugs and the sexual revolution has swept your children, and you try to shelter them from it by sending them to a Christian school, and then you let the world be brought into your homes in the form of rock music. But they didn't just want the kids. They wanted the adults. They pretty well got them with the soap operas.
They pretty well got him with the soap operas. Let's touch on that now. Part of the magic conducted, the indoctrination, because we're going to get into that. The indoctrination, the grooming of the younger generation to accept sorcery, divination, and witchcraft. Many practice Wicca as its intro. A lot of movies talk about witches and sorcery. So let me get your comments first on what John Todd had to say in using music, in using movies and soap operas into your home to indoctrinate you and put spells and curses on you.
I think he's absolutely right. And in fact, many years ago, I had an experience where the Lord had told me to get together a prayer group and to be praying as the movie The Craft came out into theaters. And he had told us to go and to be praying while the movie was playing. And what was interesting, we had no idea what we were going to get into when we were there. But as we got in and sat down, the whole stadium was filled with witches and warlocks and all these young girls. And as the young girls were watching the movie, these witches and warlocks were out loud, like saying incantations during the whole movie. And we're like, what in the world is going on here? And, it was like the girls didn't even hear it, but we clearly were, watching it happen. And then as soon as the movie was over, those priests and warlocks and witches were using that movie as a recruitment tool for those young teen girls, where they were like, wouldn't it be cool to be able to do those things? And they began to try to, invite them to some of their events to show them different things. And we were right there beside those witches and warlocks, witnessing to those girls saying, hey, you don't want to get into this stuff. And more interesting was that the majority of the girls who were attending that movie were Christians, and they were being lured away from Christ to engage in witchcraft. So I think it's very plausible, and we've seen some things. There's places where we've gone where where witches are praying over items that they leave for people to pick up. I know there was huge things, back in the 90s where they were accusing different companies like of putting incantations even on household products like
Yes.
toilet paper, paper towels, Kleenexes, and putting spells on things. We see it in some of the drinks that are sold, the sodas, the soft drinks, the energy drinks, that they're connecting spirits to these things that are going to be brought into the home. And just bringing it in, it's considered will and consent because you've spent the money or you've been gifted it and you're allowing it into your home without praying over it. Most people don't think to pray over things like that.
It's such a good point, Jesse. And they use your own free will because you must. It's the universal law. It's God's law of your own free will to accept these gifts. And I want to share this story with everybody because Jesse was a witness to this story who was with me when it happened. Now, a few years ago, we did a special conference, me and Jesse, in the US, in Florida, and a certain VIP ticket gets you to spend the entire day with us. And we go on a field trip where we try to show you places that possibly are, part of rituals or magic or supernatural things. And we try to anoint, bless that land, close those doorways and gateways. And we use that time. One of the key places I took everyone was a graveyard. And in this graveyard, there is a particular area called the Devil's Chair, where it is said that an evil spirit, possibly the devil, showed up. And a lot of people go there and give gifts. Now, listen here carefully, ladies and gentlemen. I saw some toys, and they were on this chair by this grave area. And I said, Jesse, look, what they're doing is empowering those toys with negative energy and spells. And I say, take a look at that. And they were empowering it with negative energy that it would in turn give to somebody to bring into their home and have negative energy to destroy them. Now, this could be a vengeful thing. They could be a neighbor to somebody else and use their kid, because I believe it was a toy car or some type of toy.
Yeah.
Now,
Yep.
is that correct? Yes.
Yeah, like a car, little Lego guy, and
Yes.
a couple other things.
And it was one of our team leaders, who is a biblical scholar that I use to confirm a lot of information, Mr. Burns, who took it, prayed over it, and threw it out. Well, you're not going to guess what happened in a few minutes. A few girls, witches, showed up to that exact place looking for those toys. Why were these women looking for those toys? What were they going to do with it? They turned, they didn't see it, and they left right away. A little perturbed, a little angry. And we saw other young girls dressed dark. What are you doing on a Saturday afternoon? Going to a graveyard.
To a graveyard.
To conduct,
most teens aren't going to choose a graveyard to hang out on the weekend at.
To conduct magic rituals and bring gifts to harness energy, put evil spells, and then give it to you as a gift. So the purpose of this is for us to, of course, give you warnings. Be careful with gifts that you accept from people. You don't know who they are. You may have done something bad. Maybe you get a thing of flowers. Look what's in the flowers. Look underneath.
Huh.
Look at these toys. Free gifts. You probably don't want anything for free. That's the
Well, or people on the street. Sometimes you'll have, witches or warlocks on the street, and they will hand stuff to you as you're in passing. Your natural thing, if somebody just all of a sudden holds something out, is to take it, to receive it. You know, um, you even have other groups like gypsies who will do that. They'll want to hand you something, but then it leads to a curse.
So gifts can be cursed. And the indoctrination of the youth today is to find them addictive, attractive to magic. Let me show you what I mean. In the late 70s, the indoctrination of what witches look like. Let me show you how they would portray witches. And the most famous witch of that genre, the most famous witch, ladies and gentlemen, is this witch right here. She's in a very famous movie called The Wizard of Oz. See how they made her look ugly, green, warts? That was the portrayal of the witch then. Let's look at today's society, how we call grooming, enticing you to come into the craft. That's what it's called. Take a look. Here's the most famous witch of our time. That's Angelina Jolie in this movie that came out. You see the difference? You see that darkness, that evil, but they try to make it enticing. You see? Using sexuality, using allure, mystery. And many girls want to be like her because of the movies. So what John Todd said is true. They'll use the movies to indoctrinate you. They'll use the music. They'll use television, everything in pop culture to entice you, to bring you in. This is what Deuteronomy has to say. Let no one be found among you who sacrifices their son or daughter in fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft. Biblical. We're not supposed to do that. Comments on that, Jesse?
I couldn't have said it better myself. The Lord, it's very clear that there is to be nothing that is connected to that witchcraft, that sorcery, that divination. In fact, that was part of the reason in Genesis 6 that he sent the flood, that he took out, that nation and that generation of people, because, what goes along with that, that the Lord condemned them of. He said every thought in their hearts was continually evil and wicked. There was no good in them, and they did not honor or fear the Lord. So
I have a great question. It says, George, is it okay to place flowers on a grave? Now, there's a different take on that. I have done it. I put flowers in grave as a sign of respect, honor, and love. One particular person was someone that I looked up to by the name of Lorraine Warren, who taught me a lot in the supernatural and the occult. I learned a lot from her, and I went to visit her last year, went to her grave, and I brought some flowers as a sign of respect. No manifestation or nothing. I just want to say thank you for everything she did. Miss her dearly. I had long talks with her on the phone, and she contributed a lot to opening my eyes. She was a great person, but I say that it's okay to give flowers to a loved one. What are your thoughts, Jesse?
I believe that as well. I think, when it's a gift, we think about what God's created. God has created flowers. And if the intention of our heart is to, just honor, to pay respect, that's different than if we're doing it for worship. Nowhere in scripture does it say, you can't use flowers to give honor and respect. So
very nice. Let's play this one more, not this clip, but this quote. Do not turn to mediums or seek out spirits, for you will be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. Leviticus. Do not turn to mediums or seek spiritualists. This is important. I want you guys to understand that because we get this comment every single time. Till today, still people say, can we use tarot cards? It's simple. You know, I go to the fair and there's a medium there. It's only fun. Guys, again, read this. It's do not turn to mediums or seek out spiritists, for you will be defiled by them. God says it. Don't seek them out. You don't need to it. Even if you think it's fun and it's a game, you're not supposed to do that because you open up a doorway. You become a conduit and a doorway to allow negative energy and spiritualism into your life. People like to read, you know, astrology, the tarot cards, the mediums, the palm reading, the crystal balls. All this is wrong. It's a form of divination, and you leave yourself susceptible for evil spirits to come into your life and wreak havoc on you of your own free will. When you do it, you are open to it. And then you can't say, well, it was supposed to be fun. God said no. So don't do it. So if you're asking us, we're going to say no.
You used a word earlier that I think is important to bring out. You know, you talked about that enticing, that alluring. And, you know, what's the danger in that is that you're going to keep going back. And that's a lot of times that process of being defiled is that, you know, it's not just that you do something once and then, you know, there's this, you know, grotesque uncleanness about you. It's that it becomes habitual, that you can't stop yourself from going back. Instead of seeking the Lord or his counsel or his answer or his ways, people will continuously go back again and again seeking an answer. But the truth is that those they're seeking from, it's tainted. It's not truth. It's, you know, truth mixed with maybe bits of truth mixed with lies. But as Tertullian once pointed out, you know, it's like you got a batch of honey, and within that batch of honey, there's all these drops of poison. No matter how good you want that honey to be, no matter how good you are at thinking you can locate all the drops of poison, the truth is still, if you eat that honey, you are eating poisoned honey, and you can't undo that. You know, what's it going to do? It's going to cause damage that is irreparable.
100%.
Yeah.
I like what Jacqueline says here. One day I was using 5 different oracle cards and decks, and I heard you have to die. I opened a doorway. You don't have to. So please listen to George and Jesse.
Yeah,
Guys,
great story.
Great story. You don't want that. Ruth says this. It's an addiction. Correct. It is an addiction. People get used to it and they want more and more of it. And then they're taught in media, because John Tad said it, TV shows, music, movies. It's okay. It's fun. It's not normal. It's not real. It's fantasy.
It's
Wake
not
up.
dangerous.
Yeah.
Is another one.
So mediumship, tarot cards, especially during Halloween, please stay away. This is the ultimate story. You've heard it time and time again. This is how you open up doorways of negative things into your life. Who knows? Maybe some people are nice. Maybe some of them are. Maybe some are negative and they wish to wreak havoc upon you. You just don't know. So the best thing to do is stay away.
Yeah.
Witchcraft, real or not? In closing, thoughts, Jesse?
Absolutely real.
Absolutely real. I can testify magic is real. But in my experience, the most powerful magic, and it's not magic, it's glory, I've ever seen comes from our Creator, God Almighty. The greatest miracles I've ever seen comes from the Lord. The Holy Spirit, Jesus Christ. Guys, please spend some time to give thanks and praise to God Almighty, to shield yourself with angels, to protect yourself with that light and that Holy Spirit, to watch over you, to guide you, to protect you, to give you that information that you need to make the right decisions. Discernment. and to protect you from the negative things out there, from the food. That's why I always pray over food, from the negative telepathic ways, from microwaves, from satellites, TV, the blue screen. This is why I have glasses.
Mm-hmm.
They're blue light protectors from the screens because they're trying to get us at every angle. It's a tough battle, but we have to fight the great fight. Right, Jesse?
It is. And, I love that you're talking about the miracles too. I think back to, so many miracles that I witnessed, but, one of the greatest, and we don't always know why the Lord chooses to work things a certain way, but, I can remember a couple of years back, the Lord, said to me, that I was supposed to come forward and share some tweets about some of the magic books that I had gone through as, in my times in the occult. And, one of them I posted, the Red Dragon. It's like, oh, am I supposed to do that, Lord? That's such a, strong book. And, but in faith, I obeyed the Lord. And, what happened from that, George? That's when one day you reached out and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, you've put out stuff about the Red Dragon, this book. And, that was how the Lord connected us and encouraged, both of our faith to come out and to be speaking about the occultic things that are part of our past. So we never know how the Lord is going to use our past, but we know the truth. We know that the things that the word has said, that there isn't to be any tainting of witchcraft among us, that we are to walk with the Lord and walk in the light of his truth. And that means exposing that darkness, bringing forward those things that are not of the Lord. So
it's unbelievable. Somebody said that John Todd says that the addiction to occult is worse than drugs. So true, because you are enthralled with that power. And if you get a little bit of it, you want more. All I say is you don't need it. Turn to Christ. Turn to the Lord God Almighty. You'll see things that are miracles, more power than you could ever imagine through him. You may want to manifest a boat, but you don't need it. You may manifest millions of dollars. You don't need it.
Don't manifest the boat.
I'm just saying, some people want yachts and crazy things and mansion. Listen, you don't need it. God will put into your life what you need. And that's all.
Yeah.
You pray for it. Give glory to him. The true power, true magic, true magnificence, true glory is in the light of God. And I give him praise, thanks, and glory every single day that I made that decision to leave the occult and turn to the Lord. Guys, I thank you for watching an incredible show here. An hour. It's going to be a crazy month. Lots of information to come. Jesse, how can these amazing people follow you and support your ministry?
Absolutely. I have 2 websites. You can follow me on kingdomlivingwithjessie.com, as well as if you'd like to help support the champions, the veterans, and the survivors that we support, you can do that on illuminatethedarkness.com. You can catch me on Twitter regularly, as well as on patreon.com. And I encourage you, if you're interested, we've got just a couple more weeks till I'll be in Austin, Texas with the Beautifully Adorned workshop. So if people are interested in that, you can find out more about that at kingdomlivingwithjessie.com.
Excellent. For myself, guys, I'm going to be conducting a very small, intimate event on Saturday, October 28th. That's Saturday, October 28th in Toronto, Canada. There's only going to be 30 tickets. That's it. Just 30 tickets. And it's going to be called Paranormal Ghost Stories. And I'm going to share with everybody some stories of my supernatural times. I'm going to share some pictures, some videos. I'm going to have some props with me. I'm going to talk to you about what I did. And I'm going to give you an example of how a circa seance was conducted in the early 1900s. It's going to be very interesting, very entertaining, and very informative. Only 30 tickets available. More details next week. If you're in the Toronto area, October the 28th, stay tuned. I thank you all for watching. In the link is my PayPal. If you appreciate the information, the research, and the knowledge that I put in every week to share with you, please go to paypal.me/George Iceman to show a little bit of love. Everything helps. Thank you, Jesse, for being here. And we hope each and every one of you join us next on Patreon for a Q&A. You get to ask any questions you want. Not sure we might answer every single one. Almost. We'll try. So follow us on Patreon. The link is in the description. We're going to have a great Q&A. And again, go to paypal.me/George Iceman if you can help keep this show on YouTube every Friday. Guys, get outside, get some fresh air, get some vitamin D, but most importantly, give praise, give glory, and give thanks to God Almighty. Thanks for watching. God bless, and good night.